Hello and welcome to a Seaside chat and Benthic Banter with Tammy Norgard and Dr. Charisse Dupree and the many others involved in the 2021 Pacific Seamounts Expedition, an exploration of Canada's only known seamounts and the life that depends on these underwater mountains. I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Monica, and we will relay your questions to the scientists on board. We want to hear what you'd like to ask, so please click on the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. It's also highlighted up at the top there for you. When you open that, you can type your question in the box. In the box, you can also let us know if you'd like to personally deliver your question with your video and mic on. So for example, if you have a look at the Q&A, Lauren has added a really great question. She says, where is the ship currently located? And then she said, video on, please. So we're actually going to go right to Lauren with her video so she can ask that question directly of the team at sea.
Hi, I am really interested in knowing where you are at right now. So where is the ship located?
Thanks, Lauren.
Sounds like a great question for Charisse and Tammy.
Hi, everyone. So yes, where are we located right now? Hi, everyone. I should introduce myself first. I am Tammy Norgard, and I'm the lead scientist on this Pacific Seamounts expedition. And we are located, where are we right now? Well, in this map behind me, you can see, this is Vancouver Island. Vancouver's over here, Victoria's down here, and we are this right here on a seamount just over here. And this is 350 kilometers offshore. So we're pretty close to Canada's border here on the outside. So we're on top of Union Seamount. Actually, we just moved off it. You'll see this. You'll probably see us moving a little bit because the ship is in transit. So I'm just going to give you a quick little introduction of what we're going to be doing here. We, as I said, we're on an expedition to go and explore the seamounts in this offshore area. This is a partnership between the Haida Nation, the Chalmers Tribal Council, Ocean Networks Canada, and us at Fisheries and Oceans. So we've been really lucky. This is our 4th expedition out here since we started this program in 2017. And this program is in support of Canada's effort towards marine conservation. And when Canada Canada is moving towards marine conservation of protecting 30% of its oceans by 2030. And with this large area out here is being looked at for marine protection. So we wanted to, right from the very beginning, get out here and get as much information on this deep water seamount habitat as possible. So to accomplish this work on the ship, we have a diverse team of people. We have an ROV team who run our underwater robot. So we have some of the team's going to give you a little presentation about that. We have an oceanographic team who's taking care of all our oceanographic data collection and a lot of water sampling and plankton sampling. And then we have our benthic ecologist team, which I'm a part of with Dr. Charisse Dupree. So I think I'm just going to pass over to Jackie Dietering, who is one of our ROV technicians, or I would call her underwater robot technician. And she's going to give us a bit of information on all the tools we have on this ship to use. And what is really exciting for me is this is my first trip with Jackie out to the sea when we're doing live streaming, and she's quite excited about the outreach as we are. So it's great to have another team member who's quite excited to get in front and tell you what we're up to. There you go, Jackie.
Thanks, Tammy. I've been on a lot of Coast Guard ships, but it's the first time we're doing live streaming to family and friends, and I'm really enjoying it. So I'll tell you a little bit about the ship. This is the ship we're on. It's about 70 meters long. It's a Coast Guard ship called the JP Tully. There's maybe not quite 40 of us on board, and the science team, there's 8 of us. It's a smaller team because of COVID protocols this year, so we're all juggling a lot of balls and doing a pretty good job of it. We've got some good shore support as well. Something special about the Tully for using the boots tool is that it has dynamic positioning. And that means that it uses a system that controls the ship to a very precise position in the water, on the order of, meters. So we can ask the bridge to move the ship 5 meters back or 5 meters to the side. And that's pretty amazing, and it's necessary for what we do. It also has echo sounders along the hull of it, which gives us some imaging and some good information about bottom depth. So the very first thing we do when we get to a seamount before we put any tools in the water is you kind of Charisse will draw a line over it with her mapping tools, and we get information, accurate information about the depth. And because way out here in these seamounts, we have a general idea of what the bottom looks like, but the tools on board give us a better sense of that. So back to boots. Maybe I'm going too long. So people ask, what is boots? And so it's an acronym for, it's a bit of a mouthful, Bathyal Oceanographic Observation Televideo System. But really what it is it's a collection of devices all in this structure here. And the star of it is an HD camera, and it's an amazing underwater camera. If you've been following us, you see that we can zoom in really close to see these animals, and it makes the deep sea ecologist really happy. So there's a high definition camera, there's a still camera that's looking down, taking pictures. So we have video, we have pictures. Of course, we're going into environments that are completely dark, so we need to illuminate the water around us. So we have 3 pairs of really bright lights. Other devices to help us pilot are accessory cameras that you don't see, but we're looking at. And also there's a sonar that helps us see the cliffs ahead and what's around us. Today we saw fish in that sonar, so the rockfish were hiding and we can see that behind us. We're also taking some water properties with a CTD, and we have altimeters that are looking down and telling us how far we are off bottom. We don't touch bottom, we just hover and go along. There are no thrusters on boots. We're basically what we talk about as a camera on a string, except it's a really armored cable. And if you cut that in half and you look down the cross section of it, there's it's a fiber optic cable, and then some copper cable around that for the power. So we're sending power, we're sending, and we're getting the video. And so the cool thing is that you're getting that, we're getting all of this in real time up the fiber. How deep can boots go? We can go 2 kilometers down. And how heavy is it in air? It's about 1,000 pounds. And there's no GPS. You can't use GPS underwater. So it's really important for us to know where boots is. And so what we do for that is we can acoustically, we have beacons on boots itself that communicates acoustically through the water column to a hydrophone that we have on the ship. And that gives us some accurate positioning of where boots is. And then if you looked, maybe later we'll show you our lab here. We have what looks like mission control. There's a big control panel, and all of these devices that I've talked about, the sonar, the still cameras, all of those devices we can see in a huge array of displays. And in that control panel, there's a pilot station. We have a navigator who helps with the positioning and communicating with the bridge. So it's a lot of teamwork and coordination. It's not just us at the control station. We're communicating very closely with the bridge and controlling and asking for their movements and adjustments. And also there's a deck team helping us with a really special winch that's on board. This is a heave compensated winch because of course, even right now, you can't tell, but there's a swell. And if we didn't have that heave compensation, the video would look very bouncy. You might see a little bit of that, but most of it is controlled by the winch. And so that's what we do during the daytime. We use boots. Boots will go down all day. We pull it up after supper. And then at night, there's an oceanographic activity that happens. And so those nights can be a little long for the oceanographic team. There's only 2 of them, and the rest of us go to bed. And so we have a great crew. The Coast Guard crew keeps them entertained. And Chelsea Stanley, who's the lead of that team, will tell you more about that. Thank you, Jackie. Whew. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Chelsea Stanley, and I am an oceanographic. Sorry, there's some crazy noises happening here right now. I'm an oceanographic technician for fisheries and oceans, and I have led the oceanographic program for 4 of these offshore deep seamount expeditions. So Charisse referred to us earlier in a presentation today as zombies, which is pretty accurate. So the main focus of these surveys is obviously the camera, and because the camera is quite a complicated tool to launch and recover, we want to do it during the daylight where it's light out and where we have a lot of support on deck. So that leaves the night times for the oceanographic work. So we are generally working right now between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. And yes, those are interesting hours to work. But during this time, we are sampling all of the water around the seamount. So the Benthic ecology team are really focused on looking at what's on the seafloor through the camera. And what we're interested in looking at is the properties of the water column that surround the seamount. So we are sampling water. If this noise is becoming an issue, please someone just let us know. We're not sure where it's coming from. So as I said, we are interested in looking at the water column around the seamount, looking at different water properties. So we are using a tool called a rosette, which is here in this photo. This is a water sampling device. It has a CTD on the bottom of it that is basically electronically recording all the different water properties. We're looking at temperature, we're looking at conductivity, we look at oxygen concentration, temperature. So that's giving us an active readout from the surface all the way to the seafloor. And then all of these bottles that you can see, there's 24 Niskin bottles, and each one holds 10 liters of water. When we snap those bottles, we can choose to discretely sample at specific depths. So basically that water is, we're taking the rosette down, it's in 3,000 meters of water. We close that bottle and we're capturing the water from that 3,000 meter depth. And then when we bring it to the surface, it's untouched by water from other levels. So the chemical properties at that depth are maintained in the bottle. So once we get the water to the surface, we are then sampling. We're taking physical samples out of the bottle. We are sampling physically for oxygen, for salinity, for dissolved inorganic carbon, for eDNA, which is another amazing topic and new kind of way to identify different animals around the area. And we're doing that all from this rosette. So our casts can be anywhere from 500 meters. And last night we did a cast that was well over 3,000 meters. So that takes about an hour alone just to get the rosette down to the bottom. And so what Jackie mentioned about the crew keeping us entertained. So when we're running this rosette, we're sitting in a very small room to the point where it's actually called the closet. And then the operator of the winch that's driving this rosette down to the bottom is sitting in his own little closet. And then we have the navigators up on the bridge. And we have a couple guys at night that have been keeping us entertained by telling us riddles, and kind of a competition between science and the crew on who's going to answer the riddle first. And every night the riddles have gotten a little bit harder. So that's really nice to have that kind of camaraderie on board, and it makes the night go faster for us and not quite so long and drawn out. So that's the rosette. So that's telling us the chemical properties of the water column around us. We're also looking at the biological components, which is through this. This is a bongo net. So this is 2 nets that are going down in the water column and sampling for planktonic species, mainly zooplankton. So for these, mainly we're looking at the top 250 meters of the water column, which tends to be the highest amount of biomass for zooplankton species. It's in the photic zone, it's above the oxygen minimum layer, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the animals that are living in the water column. So there's 2 nets here you can't really see, but there it looks like a bongo drum, which is how it got its name. Sorry. And the mesh on this is 236 micrometers. So basically we get a lot of small things, but really, really tiny things like phytoplankton tend to get sieved out. So we get a really accurate representation of the kind of animals that we find in the water column around the seamounts. So we're also sending this down to the bottom sometimes as well. So we're doing some deep casts all the way down to 1,500 meters. We did a cast. And so I don't know if you can see this over here. This is a viperfish on one of our first bongos. We brought up a viperfish, which tends to live quite deep, between 700 to 1,000 meters. And we brought him up alive. It was pretty amazing. And he has photophores on the bottom, so he's able to actually bioluminesce. And then he's got a lure on his head that he uses to draw in prey. So that was a really neat find. Challenging with this background noise. So another story that we like to look at is kind of how the different communities in the ocean around us are changing. And one story that we see a lot is what the squishy community or the gelatinous community is doing. Because we tend to see real big blooms of certain species and it changes year to year. So this year, we've been seeing a lot of salps. So these are salps over here. And salps are a planktonic tunicate species, and they come in solitary forms and also colonial forms. So we are pulling these up in one net alone, we pulled out 550 salps from one side, but we're also seeing them in the camera. So if you've watched any of the footage and you've seen the long, kind of, it looks like clear white long chains, those are these salps that are in big long lines down in the water, and we found them all the way from the surface down to 400 or 500 meters. We were seeing them on the bottom today at Union Seamount. So that is a lot of what we do with the oceanography. We are looking at the chemical and the biological properties. We're trying to figure out how these might impact the seamount. Some of these seamounts surfaces are right in the oxygen minimum zone. So we want to know what the oxygen levels are at those heights, those depths. And then we also want to know the animals that are around the seamounts. We're going to look if there's any difference in the colony or the types of animals that live at each seamount, if there's any difference for northern to southern seamounts, if it differences on the depths of the seamounts. So that's kind of our contribution to the project. And so, yeah, and then we're just here to support Benthic ecology because we have a smaller program this year. We're doing our best to also do things like get GPS tracks exported for Charisse and depths of the seamount from the acoustic system. And so I will introduce Charisse now. Charisse is our Benthic ecologist. She's really the heart of the program. She barely leaves her station. She doesn't really even leave her station to eat, and she can tell you all about that. Charisse.
Thank you. Thanks, Chelsea. So before I address what Chelsea said there, I got to address the elephant in the room. And that's that we're in our lab on a ship. And so ships have many floors and many compartments. There's a compartment right now with somebody who's drilling into some kind of metal rig against our wall, and we can't find them and we can't tell them to stop. So I don't know how much of that is coming across in the microphone, but it sounds like there's a dentist drilling in our heads right now. What Chelsea was alluding to there is I never leave my station, and it just happened that I started getting meal service at my station, and the jokes have not stopped about you know, I want to say like a diva status, and it's phenomenal to have meals brought to you when you can't leave your station. And Chelsea just happens to be the person who's literally carrying me a tray of food on the daily, so I really appreciate that. And I've appreciated their sense of humor when it comes to serving me meals. And actually, it's Jackie who clears them away. Yeah. So my name is Dr. Charisse Dupree. I am part of the deep sea ecology team with Fisheries and Ocean Science. And what I do is I study seamounts and the animals that live on them. So we've kind of alluded to studying seamounts directly or indirectly, all of us. So what is a seamount? Well, a seamount is an ancient underwater volcano that grows over 1,000 meters above the sea floor. Some of the seamounts in our waters can actually get to 3,000 meters tall, which puts to shame mountains like Mount Baker, which we could see from Vancouver Island. That's actually somewhat shorter than our largest seamounts. So these are really massive seamounts. They were ancient underwater volcanoes. They were eruptions. The seamounts we have in our waters now are dormant. This is a map of our seamounts here. And if you've seen this map online, you'll see that it's a very bumpy sea floor. That's because of tectonic activity that we are unlucky to have off our coast. It's why every so often the world shakes for us, but it also gives us neat features like seamounts. And so we put flags on all the seamounts that we've discovered to date. And to give you an idea of how many we've discovered, in 2017, we knew of there being 18 seamounts. We are now up to 62 and counting at the beginning of this expedition. And just in the last few days, we've discovered another 3 seamounts. So imagine going on an expedition and, you know, some of your biggest findings are literally big findings, mountains that were just hidden below the waves that nobody has seen before. So using some of the equipment that Jackie talked about, we've mapped more of the seafloor, because actually in actual fact, we know more about Mars and the moon than we do our own ocean depths. And so we've added to that information now by using Telly's acoustics that we have on board. And we've added some bumps to this already very bumpy mountain behind us. So that has to be literally the biggest of our findings, but I'm going to walk you through some of the other findings that we've made. Maybe I'll start with one that's not as happy as discovering mountains, and I'll point out that unfortunately we do see things like litter and fishing gear out here. So even though, like Tammy said, we're 350 kilometers offshore, we are still seeing the impacts of people, and those impacts, you know, are physical litter. So we see plastic out here. We see a lot of fishing gear. Unfortunately, some of these seamounts were fished in the past. Some of the effects are a little harder to see, but through science, we know that they're here. We know that these seamounts are being impacted by things like climate change. We know the acidity is rising around them. We know that they're losing oxygen. But yeah, so that's something that we've seen on this expedition. That's a photo of a plastic packet. And today, sadly, we actually lost count of how much fishing gear we saw on Union Seamounts. So not all of our findings are the kind that give you the warm, fuzzy feelings inside. But on that note, I'm going to move over to talk about nurseries, and who doesn't love babies? So we'll change it up and cheer it up a little bit. So that's this photo down here. And now it's going to be kind of hard to see them because they're camouflaged, but what we're looking at is a zoom in. So this is a coral right here to give you some size. These are little cobble, and all this texture down here is eggs. So we went to the top of a seamount that we mapped for the first time on this expedition. We explored it, we saw it, we were the first humans to see it. And when we got to the top of it, we were blown away to find this massive coral garden. And this was 1.5 kilometers down into the ocean. So we're talking really deep. And there was biomass like you wouldn't believe. Large corals, lots of animals. And then when we started looking between the corals, we actually realized that we weren't looking at just cobble and boulders, but we were looking at hundreds, thousands of skate eggs. Those are called mermaid purses. I think that's by people that are beachcombers and find them washed up. So the top of the seamount is being used by a deep water skate. It's called the White Pacific skate. And actually it was Jackie that made that ID. And this skate is a deep water skate, and it moves up slopes to lay its eggs far away from predators. And when I say predators, I mean the other skates, because lots of these animals tend to feed on the younger. So they move away. Let's get away from our population to lay the eggs. So they go up these seamounts. They found a very safe place amongst these corals, and they're laying their eggs. And in a small shot that's no more than, you know, a couple, maybe tens of centimeters across, we're seeing, you know, tens, hundreds of these skate eggs. And it's going to be a really neat paper to write up that we discovered the skate nursery ground on the summit of a volcano that we mapped and described on this expedition. So I think I have a little bit of time left, and I'm going to tell you about probably the most exciting discovery of our expedition so far. We found bucket lids. Let that sink in for a moment. So the good news is we put the bucket lids there. In 2018, we were here with a submersible that had arms, and we made markers. You can see one right here. We made markers, and we made them out of bucket lids because that's what scientists do. We just make crafty things sometimes. And we put numbers on them and reflective tape so they looked official. And they float above the surface of the seafloor, and they're weighted down. And we deployed these in 2018 in the idea that at some point we would be able to return to some of these seamounts that we had previously looked at. And we wanted to physically mark where we had really good imagery from. And so we thought that now that we're back here, we would try use boots, which, as you know, doesn't have thrusters on it, to relocate these markers. And on our first attempt, we went down at least 1 kilometer below the ship, and dropped boots right on a bucket lid. It was incredible. And so we did it. We found a site that we had surveyed 3 years ago, and now we have the first data in Canadian waters of a seamounts time series. And so we photographed it again, and we're going to be able to look at the corals, the sponges, the animals, and see how things have progressed, how things have recovered from fishing, or how things have been harmed by climate change. And so I'd just like to leave you with, like, it's akin to going to Mount Baker and looking for a Frisbee that you lost there at night and with only a flashlight. And we managed to do that not once, but actually 5 times on this expedition. So that is the data for the Benthic ecology team that I am probably most excited about. And with that, I'm going to pass it over back to Tammy Norgard, and I'm going to leave you with a fun tidbit about Tammy Norgard. I do. She's probably going to get mad at me about this. Tammy, in true science fashion, and we've been making jokes about how scientists say things, they bring science into their casual conversation. Tammy likes to premise everything with, I predict. And it's even funnier because not only is Tammy a scientist, but she is the lead scientist. So when Tammy says, I predict, everybody stops and listens, and it generally comes true, but it doesn't stop the rest of us from pretending, at least me, pretending that I'm Tammy, and I predict Tammy will be the next speaker now.
Oh, thank you very much, Charisse. That was cute. Yes, I predict I will tease you later. So, yes, and that's actually a good point, because you know what, we don't really know what's down there, so I like to make guesses. It sometimes takes a long time to get down. It's kind of like the riddle. Let's just chat about what's happening. I need my next slide there, Charisse. Oh yeah, you changed it. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so what we really want to do is just, there's one more really important pillar of our research that I really wanted to share with all of you, and that is the communication and outreach. When we started this program in 2017, we really wanted to make sure that we could share with the Canadian public and the world what's out in the deep sea. And we knew the best way to do this was communication and outreach. And so we made it one of our science objectives of our program, which means that there are times when we will actually prioritize communication and outreach during a survey like this moment. So this survey has actually produced some pretty amazing communications already. We actually, Charisse is mistaken, she called this a dragonfish on Twitter, and then had to go back and recorrect herself and call it a viperfish. And that one tweet has already made 16,000 impressions. And so we're really getting it out there. We're hoping people are actually using that to go to our live stream and ask us questions on the Slido and have a chat with us. One of the other really cool things is we have this, this little boy here was actually sent us something from Japan, pictures. After the viperfish went up, they actually sent pictures and interacted with us at sea about what they thought was interesting. We've also been able to do 2 outreach events today with our local First Nations partner communities, and actually other local schools in our communities. And that was really quite fun. It was really quite interactive and neat. And they asked some pretty fun questions, actually were super smart questions. And so we enjoy that. So we're hoping they go home and they tell their parents about it, and they tell their family about it. And the message about what's out in the deep sea and what we're doing out here is interesting. And this will help people relate to when Canada talks about what they're trying to do is saving or protecting 30% of its oceans by 2030. So I think the next thing I was hoping to do was that leave a message saying that we are out here, we're trying to share our message so that everyone can learn about the deep sea. And we truly believe that people protect what they love. And so we really want to share what we love with everybody. So we have our team here, and we're going to just pan over to our command center here, and we're hoping that there'll be a few questions for some of our team members. So let's see if we can pan over there. So right where Chelsea is so that is actually some of our screens, which are now off because our camera is out of the water. And there's Chelsea and Ben, and I'm going to pass over the mic in a bit, but I guess we can pass it back to our hosts, and they can see if there's any questions. Oh, there's our, great.
Fantastic, thank you. We do have a question here. And the first one it's from Yvonne, and it's, do you ever try and retrieve fishing gear found in order to find out where it came from?
That's a good question. So currently with the Boots drop camera, it's only a look but don't touch tool. So we unfortunately, even if we found some fishing gear that we were interested in and it looked like we could potentially retrieve it safely, we have no way to do that with our current tool.
I took it off. I think Ben covered it. I think that that we can't, but we know of organizations that are attempting to do this in the shallows, and we're hoping that the techniques that they develop in the shallows to extract fishing gear, lost derelict areas, gear on different areas of our coast will better inform us on how we might apply that in the deep sea. But definitely the technology isn't there yet, and we can't risk our vehicles like Boots. But yeah, great question.
Well, and just to thank you very much for answering that. There is also a friendly reminder to folks who are maybe joining us a little bit late that to ask a question, all you have to do is click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the window, and there you can enter your question. You can even put video please in brackets if you'd like to show your video to this line of scientists. That's the smartest lineup of people I've ever seen. And if not, we're happy to voice those questions for you. For example, there is a great question in the chat right now, and it says, my 5-year-old son Dylan wants to know, what's the coolest thing you've seen so far? And I'll preface, I'm not 5 years old. I also want to know, what's the coolest thing you've seen so far? Maybe we could go down the line and hear everybody's answer, because I hope you've all seen different things.
What's the coolest thing we so far?
So a million things.
I know. It's like, where do we start? Oh, wait. I'm in. I know who Dylan is, so I will actually. The coolest thing I have to say, those mermaid purses, skate egg cases just blew our mind away. We weren't actually expecting we haven't seen anything like that yet in all these trips, but I have to say, we haven't been to that many Seamounts yet. So every time we go somewhere, we see something new, but those egg cases piled on top of each other. And then there's like new fresh ones and there's old ones. And then seeing all the skates while we're heading up this seamount was pretty impressive, I have to say. I think Julian should answer. What's the coolest thing you've seen so far? Last night. Dylan will like that one.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dylan. Last night we actually saw a blue shark come up right to the ship, swim right up to the surface in the dark. We had a light on the water, and it was probably 5-6 feet. And yeah, it was really cool. And it just sort of swam right up to the surface, then swam right back down.
What about the ghost jelly?
Oh, what do you
You can grab that one.
Oh, yeah, I like the ghost jelly in a true ghost form. No one saw it, but it was captured on our GoPro and it was found under later review. And yeah, it was a great shot just as it went through the camera. Yeah, it's the 8th time it's been seen, captured in 30 years or forever, basically. So.
Mine is a highlight that we saw just on the starboard side of the ship. We saw porpoises one day, and we just got to see them up close, and it was unexpected. And sometimes you get an announcement, you don't make it in time, but we made it in time, and I got to see that, and that was that's always a highlight.
Okay, well, lots of good picks there. I thought it was pretty cool today. We were on Union Seamount, which is one of the shallowest seamounts that we're going to visit on this trip. And we started to get into an area with just loads and loads of rockfish, which is super neat because many of the things that we see are really beautiful creatures, but they don't move around so much. And it's always neat to see, those big, healthy schools of fish. And that was pretty special for me.
I have something really important to say. Do it. Say it. Bucket lids.
Bucket lids. Yeah.
Those bucket lids.
I think that ends up that question. That's everyone. bucket lids.
Okay, we got a question here for you. That's awesome. Fantastic. All right, so are boots lights on all the time? And isn't that hard on the deep sea animals that are used to being in the dark?
That might be a me question. Yeah. Oh, well, okay. First of all, I'll ask the boots techs. Are they always on?
Yeah, if you're seeing video down there, then our lights are on. So
Yeah.
we unfortunately to get all this video that we are able to share with everyone across the world, we need to have our lights on. Otherwise, we just wouldn't see very much. And I'll let Sharice answer the part about.
Yeah, so we do affect the creatures. Not all of them, but some of them. Lots of them, I'd say the majority of them ignore us. Some run away, actually way before we get to them. And whether it's the lights or the water that Boots is actually pushing in front of it, and they're sensing it, and they're like, no, not for me. They might leave. But others actually take advantage of the opportunity to have light down there. Maybe they're animals that travel up to the surface. And so, for instance, today, the rockfish that Ben was mentioning, I think we were actually illuminating food source for them while we were down there. And so they were actually chasing us. And Jackie was able to actually pick out a school of rockfish using our sonar that was on our tail for the entire dive, just enjoying the free lunch. So that's because we were on a shallow seamount. I'd say when we're in a deep seamount, and the animals there aren't animals that usually see the light. They basically ignore us, and we're like a bizarre UFO that just did a flyby, and it's a story they get to tell their friends, but no harm, no foul kind of thing.
I can't imagine what fish tell each other when they see, did you see that? No, I didn't. No, didn't see that.
I know, and now that we found that we can come back to sites, they're going to be like, see, I told you, look, they're back.
Exactly. Well, actually, here's a really great question from our audience. And again, thanks very much for adding them. Can a few of us tell you about what path brought you to be a scientist, a technician at sea? What's it? How'd you get here? Other than, to the boat.
I wanted to be a marine biologist since I was a child, as I'm sure many people have. I took the route of a biology degree, followed by some co-op placement. So if you go to university, kids always do co-op because it gives you huge opportunities. And then I started as a technician with DFO, which takes me to sea a lot on all different types of expeditions. So you just need to love science and love the ocean, and you can get there.
Yeah, so I guess I've always been interested in sea life, and I grew up along the coast, flipping over rocks and looking in tide pools and seeing what scurried away. And so it was always an interest of mine. And I went to school and did marine biology as well. And I didn't quite get into the ocean right to start, but I was always really passionate about biology, and that's kind of what drives me, and that's ultimately how I ended up here.
I have a similar story as Chelsea, biology degree, co-op, a bit of volunteering, and a career as a technician. I would just highlight that, other than the biology, there's so many supporting other professions that we need that we depend on a lot out here, whether it's the Coast Guard crew, we have cooks on board, we depend on engineers and electronic specialties. And so there's a lot of diversity, and we work as a multidisciplinary team, and that's been a lot of fun and really rewarding.
I'm an electronic technologist by training, and I've always liked fixing things, keeping broken things going, or doing emergency repairs. I've always somehow done that some facet of my life, and I also always liked working on boats. I've had a few different deckhand jobs, and somehow all my interests converged into this job. I'm not sure how, but
I've always had an innate interest in biology, and I was constantly watching National Geographic videos growing up as a kid, and always interested in animals in particular. But what introduced me to marine biology was a co-op program through UVic, similar to Chelsea and Jackie. And since then, I've had a growing passion for it, and I'm just been so glad to have the opportunity to come out and experience these amazing expeditions.
It sounds like it's co-op for the win. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and it also sounds like as long as you follow your dreams, you've got, you can go anywhere.
I'll just also add that I did my co-op with the Coast Guard, which led me to this job. So I do know how.
Fantastic. Okay, we got another one here. How many more seamounts are you going to explore on this expedition? That's from Yvonne.
Wait, we have 2.5 seamounts left? So it's almost homeward bound for this team. And so we think that we can fit in 2 more dives. And as per usual with our team, it's the first ever. So this is gonna be the deepest seamount tomorrow that we've ever been to as a team exploring off our coast. I think it's the deepest seamount anyone's actually ever been to off the Canadian Pacific. So it's going to be super exciting, and we'll probably do that for the next 2 days, and then we turn the ship back to land because we have a long way to travel. We got that 350-kilometer chug back to shore, so we can fit in 2 more next few days, and then it's homeward bound.
Wonderful. Here's a follow-up question for everyone. How has your work affected how you care for the ocean environment in your daily life when you're back home? What are some practical things you can do? And then we've got a really nice thank you for the live stream. And I'm curious, what can we do to help with these seamounts? What do you come home and think, I got to do something different in my life after the experiences you have out there?
Well, I've been handed the mic, stewing on the question, but yeah, it's a great question. For me, I'm relatively new to this, but I have recently decided to become vegetarian, in part because for climate reasons, but also I'm a part of the oceanography team, and we sample zooplankton, and we pull up all these krill in our nets, and I started to look at them differently when I'm having, like, I don't know, prawn pad thai or something. I start to see the prawn and I think about these little krill that we're pulling up, and it really rewires my brain, and so that's in part how it has impacted me. And so yeah, I've decided to become vegetarian.
Well, one thing I just like, when you actually just like go down into the ocean, you have like a camera, you could like people don't like, it's like you could things that people like maybe discard in the ocean, or there's like lost fishing gear, like you see that it just doesn't like go away, that it's just there. So that kind of changes your perspective for that, like seeing like some beer cans and yeah, fishing gear down there that, you know, doesn't make a nice crab home, that's for sure.
My angle, and this is a bit different. I have 2 young kids at home, a 3 and a 6-year-old, so that keeps me busy. But what I try and do and prioritize some of our time exploring, you know, the tide pools and the beach days, and fostering that respect for the ocean with the kids and their friends and their classmates.
Yeah, I think I guess I'm kind of piggybacking what Andy said is kind of similar to me. Like, it makes me think about the things that end up on the seabed, and just the amount of things we go through that are, we might think of as disposable in our daily lives, and how we can do better on that front, so that as humans, we all do better, and try not to introduce more of those things onto our seamounts and deep sea habitats than we already have.
From doing zooplankton taxonomy, I've been struck by the presence of microplastics. So you think about throwing a beer can or something large in the ocean, but you're not realizing that every time you wash your clothes, there's microplastics that are getting washed into the ocean. And then we're pulling these samples up and they're wrapped around animals and they bioaccumulate. And so it's even just the smallest things, like thinking about what fabrics you're buying, and even trying to get some sort of special system in your washing machine to really filter those out, that will make a big impact as well. So it's all the way from the tiny stuff all the way to the big.
I'm going to jump ahead as Charisse because I'm going to say the things and she probably will. But I try not, it's the same thing as Ben was saying, just use your stuff as long as you possibly can. The precious minerals and that we need to get for our cell phones, for example, and stuff are going to have to come from deep sea mining, or that's what we've been told. And so the impact on these seamounts will be significant if the deep sea mining takes off. So we try to use our stuff as long as possible and recycle it properly.
Tammy absolutely went where I would have gone. So I'll say something different. Okay, so how does being out here affect going back to shore in our daily lives? When we're out here, we're immersed in this underwater world, and we're capturing this imagery, and we're reminded of the wildlife that is hidden below the waves. And you forget that when you're sitting at your office, crunching the black and white numbers on the screen, grappling with statistics so that you could publish a paper. But then you come out here again and you see the images, and it reminds you that these are real lives. These are real characters at the bottom of the sea that are playing out, hopefully without us interrupting. And it reminds me of why I'm doing this. And it's so powerful that I'm reminded that I need to share that imagery and those stories as much as possible, because it does trickle into everybody's mind, whether, you know, it's Julian deciding to become vegetarian, or Tammy isn't going to buy every iPhone that comes out just because the camera is slightly better. It trickles in, and you don't have to be out here on the ships to have it affect you. You maybe watched a Nat Geo, you maybe saw a post online, you may be reminded that that we affect wildlife and wild places. So I think that leaving this expedition, it's just rekindled that passion to make sure I share the imagery so that other people can be influenced by it.
Thank you very much. All good advice.
Definitely. Oh, fantastic. Thank you for that. That was wonderful listening to that. Okay, we do have a question here. A few. What is each of your favorite deep sea animal? What is your favorite deep sea animal?
My favorite deep sea animal is the viper fish. So it is a fish that we caught in one of our samples. It became a bit of a social media hit, and it's a deep water fish. It's got these huge teeth, very personable. Look them up.
I'm gonna have to go with a brittle star. I think they're super neat because we see them in all different sorts of ways. Sometimes there's just one or two scattered around, or sometimes like on the dive we did on Union Seamount today, there are just like endless fields of them. And it's a super simple creature, but you know, it's got a lot of personality. Sometimes they're waving around, sometimes they'll skitter out of your way, so you never kind of really know how they're going to behave when you see them. So it's neat.
Pacific white skate. It's like 2 meters long and a white color, and I got to see it for the first time this trip, and that's one of my favorites.
I like the rockfish because they always look like really grumpy, like you just woke them up.
I like seeing the animals together, like a rockfish putting itself in a sponge. I always think that's pretty fun. So yeah, the interactions are always really interesting.
can do this with a straight face because my mask is on. The Pacific white bucket lid.
Charisse, I know it's
do
going to be on your Christmas list. I tell you, I predict.
I predict you got it. Actually, I gotta say it's corals. It's the habitat forming corals that are down here. The oldest living animal on our planet has been dated at 4,500 years old, and it's a deep sea coral. And these animals are amazing. They sink carbon into the ocean. They create habitats, their food, their refuge. They're amazing and they're beautiful. And they're like seeing coral reefs in the tropics, except they're in Canada, off our waters. And it's just we don't get to swim with them on the daily, but it's amazing that they're here, and I really appreciate them.
That's actually a really great segue into a great question. Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't get to hear from you. Sorry, Tammy.
That's okay. It was really quick. It's going to be the octopus, which we haven't seen today. I'm missing him. Okay, go on. Segue on to the next question.
My apologies. We do need to know which one is yours as well. It's actually whether or not seamounts are being explored around the world. So how does Canada compare findings with other countries? Is this totally Canadian? Is this something that we expect other places? Where does Canada sit in all this?
Right. So Canada actually sits at the forefront of a lot of things to do with deep sea exploration. We've led the way in many fields, and now Seamounts is really no different. And I can boast like that because people just don't have that tectonic activity near their coast like we do on Vancouver Island. Nobody has that small plate interaction that shakes up their world every now and again and also happens to create seamounts. So it is very unusual and unique to have seamounts in your coastal waters. To give you a comparison, Atlantic Canada has 0, Arctic Canada has 0, and Pacific Canada has 65 and counting. So not just Canada, but BC is incredibly fortunate and unique to have this many seamounts. So to have gone out this close to shore, because this is relatively close for seamount research, be able to survey them almost every year. In the short amount of time that we've been running this survey, we've moved from not knowing that much about seamounts to having some of the best studied seamounts in the world. And we really are helping out. We go to international commissions, whether it's for deep sea mining or deep sea fishing. Canadian scientists are there discussing and teaching about ecosystems on seamounts to help with those decision making at that high level. Most tectonic activity that creates seamounts is far off in the ocean in the middle of it, and that's high seas jurisdiction, so international waters. So when it comes down to having seamounts in your country, Canada is right up there with some of the highest density in the world. We actually have 5 times the density that is the average for the world. So it's a really neat thing that we have this opportunity.
Lucky we are. We're lucky to have you all out there. Thank you for all what you're doing. And we're going to go back to a question about marine debris garbage. And it's from Yvonne. Did you find much plastic during your dives? How much pollution is down there?
Someone else? Jackie.
Yvonne, I can't say that we saw a whole lot. We saw more fishing debris than we've seen plastic debris, but we're setting eyes on a very small spatial part of what's down there. So when you extrapolate that, I think there's certainly that number grows.
Yeah. I'll just add to that some of that fishing line does have plastic intertwined into it. So and when we would pass over it, we were only seeing a field of view that was meters by meters. That fishing line, that long line gear, actually represents equipment that's 3 kilometers long. So every time you heard us say there's another piece of fishing gear, we're actually seeing a small fragment of a line that's being set that's 3 kilometers, that has anchors on it, floater lines. So there's a lot more fishing gear, and that fishing gear, when it breaks down in the deep sea, actually releases those microplastics that Chelsea was talking about. So as it rubs against the seafloor with current action, it's releasing that. So there is that aspect of it that isn't your like typical plastic bag, but another form of plastic debris that we were adding to the ocean floor. Hi, Mom.
Yeah, let's see now. I have a tough question here. Let's see here. Is it going to be possible or will it be hard to police such a large marine protected area?
Yes, it is, but actually there is, that's the question we've been asking for a very long time since we starting this process, but Canada now has sort of a very advanced satellite system up there that can track ships. And so there's one called Fishing Watch, and it's actually watching all the fishing vessels. And if a vessel does something it shouldn't be doing, it alerts somebody and it's investigated. But then Canada also has some other very advanced satellites that can track ships that are actually called ghost ships or don't actually have their AIS, their positioning systems off. And so we will know if there's ships out here. It's not going to be super easy to get out to them if you're not don't already have a ship out here to investigate, but there is a way to track an area. You definitely can do it.
Don't we have one plane?
And we have one plane, and that plane was out here yesterday and did a drive-by on us. Just it was out here doing its patrols. And for that matter, we've seen it out here a lot. It visited us when we were on John Kinko's Bowie, so it does regular patrols as well. So there is a system. It's a big area though, so yeah, that has been something we've been talking about for a long time.
All right, I think we have completed all of our questions for today. Monica, did you have any other questions?
I actually, my only question would be to invite the science team to share with us one last item before we depart. We are at 8 o'clock, which is our scheduled kind of stop, but we do have a little bit of time. So I would just open the floor, whether it's a hi mom, which we did already get, or another piece of wisdom that we need. I just love to give the science team a chance to kind of give us one last piece of knowledge.
One last piece of knowledge. Well, I feel like I need to think about this for a little bit.
Thanks for watching.
You know something?
I'll just say thanks everyone who's been following us so far on the video. Keep joining us. It's really a unique opportunity that you guys are getting by watching all these live streams from the deep ocean. We wouldn't have been able to do this 10 years ago. And I just want to say hi to Cam and Rory and Morsby.
That is actually a really good point. We do spend a lot of effort into making this live stream happen. So share. Let everybody know we're still out here for a couple days, and you can easily find the link to getting us through our hashtag Pacific Seamounts 2021.
Did you think of one?
Anybody else want to share?
Did you think of one?
Hey mom, hey dad, if you're there. Sarah, hi.
What was your word of wisdom?
Word of wisdom.
Should be like eat your vegetables.
Yeah, eat your vegetables, kids.
Those are always excellent words of
Say
wisdom.
hi to my mom and dad and any my family that might be watching. But yeah, something that I think is kind of neat to keep in mind is like we're living in a kind of a really unique time because even maybe 30-40 years ago, being able to go down to the bottom and some of the deepest parts of the ocean and learn about what's down there just wouldn't have been possible. So I'm sure there were many curious people that lived before us and would have loved to see this. So it's pretty neat that we get the chance to do that. So yeah.
All right, and Charisse, actually there is one more item in the chat for you. It says yes, it says happy birthday tomorrow from Yvonne.
I aged. Before we say goodbye, I have a word of wisdom. And that's if you find a good team, or if you can find a good team, prioritize it, because it's actually hard to be at sea, away from your family. Hi, family. And it's long hours out here, and the ship's moving, and sometimes you don't feel great. But if you have a crew and a team that you work with that are super rad and make you laugh, then it doesn't feel like work so much. So my word of wisdom is, if you find a good team, keep them, and if you don't have one, find your people.
Oh, so many amazing messages here. Thank you all so much for this amazing presentation. Monica and I are just going to wrap it up for today.
Yeah, we just, of course, as always, expressing gratitude. Thank you very much. This broadcast has been brought to you by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the Council of Haida Nations, the New Chalnos Tribal Council, and Ocean Networks Canada. So thank you so much for everyone for making that a possibility.
Yeah, and if you want to continue following this expedition, please do so. Follow the hashtag Pacific Seamounts 2021. You can continue to follow that live stream at oceannetworkscanada.ca Pacific Seamounts 2021. And you can continue to ask questions of the team at sea by following the Slido link. We'll put that link in the chat.
And of course, if you are interested in more adventures, ONC, Ocean Networks Canada, will be sailing again in July, and you can watch for updates on our Twitter, and as well, Lauren will put the link in the chat. Big thank you to everyone, and we hope everyone has a nice, quiet and smooth night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Safe travels. Take care.